morning, everyone, and welcome back to Cyber Mornings Daily. We're going to be doing a deep dive today into some recent law enforcement actions
No, yeah.
that have really kind of shaken up the cybercrime world.
Right.
You know, every now and then, I think it's good to have a little bit of good news in cybersecurity,
For sure.
and seeing authorities really kind of crack down and take down these bad actors is definitely a win.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 stories for you today that are really kind of ripped from the headlines and really ripped from a cybersecurity thriller.
It's encouraging to see law enforcement really stepping up their game and really taking the fight to the cyber criminals.
For sure. So first up, we've got a story about a SIM swapping scheme that targeted
Oh, wow.
none other than the SEC,
Really?
the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Wow.
Remember Eric Council Jr.? This is the guy who managed to hijack their X account.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about audacity.
It's incredible how he was able to pull this off. He didn't use some complex, unheard of exploit or anything like that.
Right.
He used a simple SIM swap attack. And for our listeners who might not be familiar with this, that's where you basically trick a mobile carrier
Right.
into transferring the victim's phone number to a SIM card that the attacker controls.
Yeah.
And it's a surprisingly effective technique.
Yeah. And to make it even more convincing, he created a fake ID. So once he had control of the SEC's account,
Right.
he and his co-conspirators, they posted a fake announcement about Bitcoin ETFs being approved.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine the chaos that ensued?
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin's price immediately shot up by $1,000 before plummeting $2,000 after the SEC came out and clarified the situation.
Right.
And this case really kind of underscores how SIM swapping isn't just about, stealing personal information or, financial gain.
Right.
This is something that can be used to manipulate markets and cause widespread financial turmoil.
Yeah, it was a high-stakes SIM swap, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker.
What's that?
Counsel actually searched online for signs that the FBI was investigating him.
Oh, no.
Talk about incriminating yourself.
Wow.
Ultimately, he ended up pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit aggravated identity theft and access device fraud, which could land him up to 5 years in prison.
Wow, that's a stark reminder that even seemingly simple methods like SIM swapping can have some really serious consequences.
For sure. So let's shift gears now to the world of ransomware, where we've seen some exciting developments in taking down these notorious operations.
Okay.
And specifically, let's talk about the Lockbit ransomware group,
Right.
a group that has been making headlines for their high-profile attacks.
Right.
The authorities managed to take down Z Servers,
Oh, wow.
which was a bulletproof hosting service used by Lockbit.
So bulletproof hosting is kind of like the safe haven for cybercriminals.
Yeah.
There are these providers that offer web hosting with practically zero oversight or regulation.
Yeah,
And this makes it incredibly difficult for law enforcement to track them down.
exactly. And that's why this takedown was a huge win.
For sure.
And it involved a coordinated effort between the US, UK, and Australia, who all slapped sanctions on Z Servers and its administrators.
This kind of international collaboration is absolutely crucial when you're dealing with cybercrime, especially since these groups operate across borders,
Right.
disrupting their infrastructure. Like these bulletproof hosting services can seriously hinder their operations.
Yeah, it sends a strong message that there is no safe haven for these guys.
Absolutely.
And speaking of sending a message, our third story takes us to Thailand, where 2 Phobos ransomware affiliates were arrested.
Okay.
These weren't just small-time players.
Right.
These guys were allegedly involved in over 1,000 cyber attacks.
Wow.
And what's really significant about these arrests is the fact that Europol,
Oh, wow.
the European Union's law enforcement agency,
Right.
played a key role.
Okay.
They had actually infiltrated the Phobos operation through an earlier arrest, which allowed them to gather intel and ultimately protect over 400 potential victims.
That's incredible. That just shows the importance of proactive investigation and, getting ahead of the curve instead of just reacting to attacks after they happen.
Right, so we've got these 3 stories, and in each one it seems like the good guys are coming out on top.
That's right. It's definitely a positive sign, but while these actions are encouraging, we need to remember that the fight against cybercrime is far from over.
Yeah, so let's take a closer look at what these wins really mean for the future of cybercrime. So it feels good to report on these victories, but, it kind of makes you wonder,
Yeah.
Are these wins really going to make a lasting impact?
Right, that's the question, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like we're constantly playing this game of whack-a-mole,
Oh,
with
man.
these cyber criminals. As soon as you take one down, another one pops up.
Yeah.
Somewhere else, they're incredibly resourceful and
Right.
they're quick to adapt.
Yeah. But I mean, the fact that we are seeing these takedowns
Oh, sure.
is a huge step in the right direction.
Absolutely. It sends a clear message that law enforcement is, they're not messing around. They're taking this seriously.
Yeah.
And they're developing, really sophisticated strategies to combat it.
One of the things that really struck me about these cases was just the different approaches that are being used to tackle these cyber criminals.
Yeah.
In the Zsrvers case, we saw this classic follow the money approach
Mm.
using sanctions
Right.
to kind of cut off their financial lifeline.
Yeah, financial sanctions can be a powerful weapon against these types of groups, especially like ransomware operators who are ultimately motivated by profit.
Right.
But, they're not always a foolproof solution.
Right.
These groups can be incredibly crafty
For sure.
when it comes to, finding ways to circumvent sanctions and continue their operations.
It's important to remember, too, that, these arrests and these takedowns are often the culmination of, sometimes years of investigation and collaboration between multiple agencies,
Oh, absolutely.
sometimes across international borders.
Right. And it's a testament to the dedication and the hard work of, law enforcement professionals all around the world.
Right.
Who are committed to, bringing these cyber criminals to justice.
And, going back to the SIM swapping story for a second, I think it's a stark reminder of just how vulnerable we all are in this digital age.
For sure.
I mean, if the SEC, with all of their resources, can be hit with a SIM swap attack, it kind of makes you wonder what chance the average person has.
Yeah, that's a great point. It highlights how SIM swapping is a relatively low-tech attack,
Right.
but can be incredibly effective.
Right.
And, it goes beyond just, stealing money or information.
Right.
This can be used to manipulate market spread misinformation,
Yeah.
tarnish reputations. It's a serious threat.
So for our listeners out there, what can they do to protect themselves? Is it even possible to be truly safe in this digital landscape?
Well, there's no magic bullet for 100% security,
Right.
but there are definitely steps you can take to minimize your risk. Contacting your mobile carrier and enabling extra security measures like, requiring a PIN or a passphrase for any changes to your SIM card is a great first step.
That's good advice. And I think it's a good reminder, too, to just be vigilant
Absolutely.
about, any suspicious activity on your accounts, whether it's email, social media, bank accounts.
Exactly. The sooner you spot something fishy, the better your chances are of mitigating the damage.
Right.
And remember, never be afraid to report, suspected fraud to the authorities.
Right, because sometimes it can feel, overwhelming, like we're all sitting ducks for these cyber criminals.
Yeah. But it's important to remember that we're not alone in this fight.
Right.
There are countless individuals and organizations out there who are dedicated to protecting our digital lives, from security researchers
Right.
to ethical hackers to cybersecurity professionals all around the globe.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from SIM swapping and ransomware takedowns to the importance of vigilance in this ever-changing digital landscape. Okay, so we've seen law enforcement land some pretty solid blows against these cyber criminals. But what's the big takeaway for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is awareness is key.
Right.
Don't ever think, oh, it can't happen to me.
Right.
These cyber criminals, they cast a wide net. They don't discriminate.
For sure.
The more you understand their tactics, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself.
Right. But knowing is only half the battle.
Right.
So what are some practical steps that people can take to kind of bolster their defenses?
Well, it all starts with good cyber hygiene. Be cautious about clicking on links, especially if they seem suspicious. Think twice before opening attachments from senders you don't recognize.
Right.
And never, ever give out your personal information unless you're absolutely sure it's a legitimate request.
I think those are great everyday reminders.
Uh-huh.
I know I'm guilty of clicking before I think sometimes.
Oh, we've all been there. And when it comes to your online accounts, strong passwords are non-negotiable.
Right.
Use unique passwords for every single service. Don't reuse them, and enable multi-factor authentication wherever possible.
Right.
It adds an extra layer of security that makes it much harder for attackers to gain access.
Yeah. Those are all things that I think everyone can do right now. But what happens if, despite our best efforts, we become a victim?
If you suspect you've been targeted, don't hesitate to report it to the authorities.
Right.
Every report helps them track cybercriminal activity and potentially prevent others from falling victim.
Right.
Your local law enforcement agency is a good starting point, or you can reach out to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaints Center.
Okay.
They have resources to help you navigate the situation.
Well, that's reassuring to know.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a fascinating, albeit slightly unsettling,
Right.
journey into the world of cybercrime today.
Yeah, it's like we're living in a real-life thriller sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's a constantly evolving landscape, that's for sure. But remember, knowledge is power. The more informed you are about the risks and the proactive steps you can take, the better you'll be at navigating the digital world safely.
Well, that's a great note to end on. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and above all, stay safe out there, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
And a big thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay secure.